Hello, hello. Welcome. This is the webinar on scaling content. I got a little distracted because Georgie just walked up and she's like trying to get up in my business. She's like, pay attention to me. Welcome, everyone. It looks like we have a good crew in here. I'm going to say hello. What's up, Michael? We have Nick. We have Brian. We have an international crowd, uh, very international. We got Brian. We have Dennis, Rob, Elliot, Jim, and Andy. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so very much an international crowd. We have a big Canadian contingent, which is great. A few folks from across the pond. So welcome. Again, we're going over scaling content, building a team. By the way, you can sort of use these ideas for other content. So we'll talk specifically about, written content, probably for affiliate marketing type websites, but you can use this for anything. So let me know also in the chat, do you have a site running currently? Are you looking to launch a site? Are you at a spot where you want to like scale your content production? The answer to the question will help me sort of tailor what I'm presenting today, to make sure I like focus on the same part. So for example, there's a lot of people who already have sites and maybe you've hired a few writers. Well, then I can go a little bit deeper. But a lot of people, maybe you're thinking about launching a site. This is kind of advanced stuff. So maybe I could scale it back and talk about hiring some of the first couple people. Cool. So it takes a couple minutes for folks to join up and all that. And just curious, how many people do have sites out there? I know there's a little bit of a delay. So I'll try and be patient as I wait for the answers and just kind of jam a little bit, fill time, literally talk about nothing in particular. So I should have thought of that before we got started. But interesting thing, I know a lot of people here watch my YouTube channel, and it's kind of cool. We're approaching 10,000 subscribers. So that's pretty fun because it was a long journey. Internet marketing is a competitive area, and I have a fairly, I would say, I don't know, dry approach as an engineer, and I'm not an entertainer by trade or anything like that. So it's a little bit more like tutorial based, but I'm trying to do a little bit more on the side of like vlogging, maybe be a little more entertaining. I mean, I would like to be entertaining, and I hope sometimes it is, but a lot of times I do better with like interaction. So if it's just me, it's a little harder. Anyway, Andy is saying, how can I enroll in your course? All right. So what I try not to make these free trainings a pitch fest. I know a lot of people basically they have a training, they call it a free training. Really, it's a webinar where they can maybe not tell you that much, and then they try and sell you something. So I avoid that. Andy, if you want to enroll in the course, I'll grab a link for you right when we get started here, and you can sort of shortcut the line. So previously, I used to have a launch once a quarter, so sometimes like you couldn't enroll. I've tried to change that. I've worked out the kinks. I've figured out how to let people enroll when you're ready. So Andy, I'll send you a link here in the chat privately if you want to check it out, and then you'll be able to see the offer. Now, one of the reasons why I don't try and pitch it or just send out the link is because it's a little bit out of context. You may not have all the information. So I'll mention that you may not have all the information, but that said, here's the link. I'm sending it over to you privately because, like I said, I try not to make it a pitch fest or anything like that. Okay. A couple questions that were coming through. Okay, so quick thing to note. Questions, I'll have a question and answer at the end. So if you could mark your questions as questions, that'll be helpful. I'll sort of talk about, the topic today, and it'll probably answer a lot of your questions. So I'll keep them in mind as we're going through. I'll mention that, let's see, Dennis says you're building a brand new site with plans of publishing 200 to 300 posts in 2 years, mostly Q&A using the keyword golden ratio. Very cool. Rob said you just started your site last week. Brian just started a site. Andy, you're starting your first project. Very cool. And then we have Michael's about to start your affiliate website. So how many members does my team have and what are the roles? Cool, Tom. That is literally in the presentation. So I'll talk about that. And Dennis is saying some more details about like his site, how many posts are out there, and actually this is a good data point for people that are just getting started. So Dennis, he's experienced. It's not his first site, but he's done 45 posts in the first 2 months, and there's about 90 to 125 visitors a day so far. All right, so think about that. That's pretty good. That's a great benchmark. And I would say if you're just starting with your first site, that may be a bit much. Okay, enough with the preamble. Let's get to business here. All right. Hiring writers for niche and authority sites, basically affiliate sites without stress. So if you follow this approach, you'll be able to start with no one on your team and then slowly grow your team over the course of as short as, say, 3 weeks or however long it takes. Maybe it's 8 weeks. You can grow your team basically as large as you want it to be. So there's no like real upper limit. The way I'm going to show you how to do this is completely modular. You'll have the ability to grow to however big you want your team to be. And so sound check, I always check that. People can hear me since we've been talking back and forth. Who am I? Doug Cunnington. I founded Niche Site Project back in 2013. Before that, I didn't know anything about internet marketing, websites, WordPress. I literally was brand spanking new. I found Smart Passive Income and Pat Flynn. I learned about niche sites and affiliate marketing and making money online. And then my whole world changed. That's I have border collies. I like border collies. That's Georgie, who is sitting at my feet right now. And then that's my dad and myself with our old dog, Brody. He passed away a little while back, but he was a really good dog. And I live close to Yellowstone. So that's why we're at the Old Faithful Geyser. And if you're interested in vlog stuff, we're actually going down to Yellowstone in a couple days just to, go check it out. It's just a couple hours away. So why should you listen to me? I've been featured in several blogs, some podcasts as well, a lot of the brands you've heard of. So I'm not just talking about stuff that I've heard other people talk about. Everything that I'm going to tell you here, I've literally done multiple times in different types of content scenarios. So not just written content. I've done it on YouTube, literally the same process. I have a project management background. I'm a PMP, and I've sort of taken those frameworks and I try to apply it to what I'm working on now, which is internet marketing and content and SEO and that sort of thing. Today, of course, we're focusing on content. Now, before we go on, I always put in this niche site timeline. As I mentioned in 2013, I didn't know anything about anything. I spent a lot of time brewing beer and learning about beer and drinking beer. And then I found Smart Passive Income and learned all about this other world, and then got obsessed with affiliate marketing. I still drink beer and brew beer, by the way, but I don't listen to the podcast anymore. Anyway, one of the reasons I put this slide in here is to show you the roller coaster ride. A lot of people will just show you their highlight reel. They will only talk about, the biggest successes, and it sounds like they're an overnight success, but really it was, 5 or 8 or 15 years that they were working on something, and then they were an overnight success. So in this case, I had, early success. Things went well pretty quickly. And then I had many sites penalized. And you'll notice there were actually more failures than successes, but the successes were pretty big. And every time I made a mistake, I tried not to make it again. Sometimes I did, but I tried really hard not to do it again. And things are going well. So things are going well, and I'll leave it at that. But remember, when you hear these highlight reels from certain marketers and you don't hear any struggles, like I would maybe question the credibility a little bit. Just a reminder, the Q&A is at the end. You can mark the questions as questions just to make it easier for me to see them. Additionally, if there's some tech glitch, which happens from time to time, maybe you can't hear me or the video freezes, try to refresh it. Let us know in the chat as well. Sometimes it's on my end, sometimes it's on your end. But if you refresh it, a lot of times that'll alleviate the issue if it's on your side. If you let us know in the chat, then I could troubleshoot if needed, and some of the fine people in the chat can help you out as well. So we'll get to it now, how to scale content for niche and authority sites. You'll learn when you should scale. All right. So actually, I was about to answer it, but you'll learn when you should scale. I'll show you my org chart, and I keep a pretty lean team. I had a job in a corporation where there was a lot of hierarchy and there were big org charts and a lot of levels. And I don't like that. I didn't want to build another, hierarchy like that. I'll share the checklist that I have for the content manager / editor. I'll just call them editor, but I'll explain the role later. And then I'll talk about what saved me a lot of time. So I mentioned 24,360 minutes in a year, and I've definitely saved more than that over time. But this snapshot of a case study, which we'll get into, was a 5-month period in 2016, but I did it again in 2017. I'm currently doing a similar thing right now. So the goal. So it's always important to understand like what you're trying to do and why, rather than just like doing something. Sometimes you can figure things out once you start executing, but it's really better if you have a goal in mind. So increase revenue. That was my goal. All right. That's like if you're watching this, that's probably your goal. If you have a site or you're starting a site or you're about to start a site, probably what you want to do. All right. So for my scenario, I wanted to publish keyword golden ratio content, KGR content. Now, by the way, if you're not familiar with KGR, you'll hear people talking about it a lot on YouTube and across a couple different platforms and channels and stuff. It's a concept that I developed around low competition keyword research, and it's a data-driven way to find keywords. There's a lot of keyword difficulty tools, keyword competitiveness. Some of them are just crap. They're terrible. Some of them are getting better, right? Some of them are getting a lot better and they're a little more accurate, but the KGR is something you can't automate. You need to do it manually. Google throttles the search method. So it really cuts down on the competition because it's kind of hard and it takes time and people are lazy. So if you spend time to look for the keywords, you can literally find them. Okay. So KGR content, increase revenue. That was my goal. All right. So the facts. I'm going to lay out the full scenario here. I'm going to tell you, the beginning state, the end state, the results. I'll tell you how much I paid my team and all that stuff here in the beginning. All right. So here are the facts. In 2016, and this is a little bit dated, but again, this was like the preliminary example, and I've done this multiple times and published like 2 to 3 times the amount of content. Okay. So that said, a site was making, this is an Amazon affiliate site, was making about $100 a month in January of 2016. By the end of the year, it made $14,819 in December, right? Staggering growth. Yes, it was the retail season, but when you check out this graph, that's crazy. The scale just doesn't make sense, right? It looks like no money was being made at the beginning because so much happened at the end of the year. So what happened after that, right? Was this just a flash in the pan? So no, the site made 70,000. This is just one single site, by the way. One site, 70,000 in 2017. So $70,101. All right. Earnings continue to be good. At some point, I stopped sharing the revenue. It's just a personal choice, slightly unrelatable at some point. So it's making good money. Now the details. So I got a question about this just today. People basically ask multiple times a week, where do you hire writers? Upwork. 100% of the time, I hire from Upwork. How much do I pay? For this particular set, I was paying like $14 to $15 per 1,000 words on average. Right now, I'm paying just a little bit more. It's more like $15 to $17 or so, just because of the quality of the writers, stuff like that, and maybe the pricing. And at some point, I just edge the offers up a little bit, and I give people raises if they work with me for a little while. So, like I said, if they're good, I'll pay them more. I don't want to spend the time to find more people. If I have someone that does a good job, I'll slowly give them, say, like 50-cent raises after a few gigs. And I just surprise them, right? I don't say, hey, if you do a good job, I'll give you a 50-cent raise. I just give them a raise without asking, and then they're grateful. For the editor role or content manager, I paid between 10 and 20 bucks an hour. Depends on how long they worked with me, how qualified they were, and that sort of thing. Again, start on the low end, and then I would give people raises over time. How long would it take the editor to do the work that they were doing, editing and content management? About 45 minutes to an hour for one post. Now, the interesting thing is when I did that same work, it would take me, I don't know, like an hour and a half or 2 hours because I did it a little slower. And I don't know, I just kept fiddling around with things. So it took a long time. So when should you scale? It's later than you think. We often hear, people we look up to, our role models maybe talking about scaling, and then we think, hey, I got to scale. I need to think about scaling as soon as possible. But we usually hear from our role models after years of experience, right? They've been working on something for a while, and we're thinking, hey, we need to scale, and we're on week 1 or week 2. And the person we're trying to emulate is on day 450, right? Like it's a big difference, and it takes time to like grow into it, right? You have to kind of spend some time doing the other work, and it takes time to get there. So when should you scale? Probably later than you think. And a couple benchmarks you could look for. Maybe your site has some stable traffic, at least like a bottom sort of benchmark of traffic, and some revenue. So there's no set amount. It depends on the niche and how long you've been working on it. But just as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't try and scale until maybe you were getting like 50 to 150 visitors per day or so. It doesn't mean you shouldn't add content, but what I'm going to describe is like a very specific effort to add a bunch of content in a short amount of time. Okay. Now, if you don't have any traffic to your site yet, then that means you probably need to focus on the basics for a little while, like keyword research, like the KGR, like we were talking about, and potentially outreach. So I know a lot of people have been seeing success with like no outreach, no link building, just using the KGR, which is great, right? That's what I want to see. However, all things being equal, knowing that, backlinks are helpful. I mean, you should probably get links, right? If someone else has equivalent content as far as quality, similar length, same sort of topic. If you have links to your site, you're probably going to do better. So if you don't have traffic yet, focus on the basics until you have some baseline of traffic. Now, if you don't have a budget to invest in writers, then you should wait until you can afford it. So either, save the money from your day job to be able to do it, or wait until you get that critical mass of traffic where you're starting to make some money and you could reinvest it. All right. So if you can't afford it, just be patient. Grow slowly. So if you haven't built a team before, but like maybe at your day job or something, then you should definitely try and take this slowly. I happen to have quite a bit of experience interviewing people, looking at resumes, hiring people. I probably did over 100 interviews. So probably each one of those took an hour, and I was looking at resumes. So I've spent a lot of time doing that. And then after hiring people, I've onboarded folks. In fact, I was in charge of a team where I think we grew it from about, 25 people to over 100. And I onboarded the majority of them. I wrote the document that helped onboard the people. All right. So when you're growing a team, you don't want to grow it too fast. It takes more work to manage them than whatever you were doing before. All right. So the last thing you want to do is stress yourself out by hiring several people, and then they all have a couple questions. They're all waiting for work to do. And that would, kind of be expensive if they're just idle waiting for work and you feel like you need to pay them. You rush, you get stressed out. So be patient, grow slowly. Things are going to go wrong, can absolutely guarantee it. And your plans are going to change. Something's going to happen unexpectedly and you can't do anything about it. Like it's almost 100% guaranteed it's going to happen. It could be around your keyword research. Maybe one of your writers has some personal issue. Maybe there's some issue with sharing the documents. Any number of unpredictable things could happen. So, okay, if you have built a team in your corporate setting or your day job or whatever, then you probably know that when you hire people, problems are created. Every time that you have a new person on the team, there's another communication interface, and that creates kind of a problem. So basically, imagine this. If you had an unlimited budget, actually, we'll just make it big. Let's say you had $10,000 per month to invest in content, and you could hire whoever you wanted and as many people as you wanted. You probably wouldn't want to hire as many people as your budget would allow right away. You would need to slowly hire people, make sure they were trained along the way before you start adding more people. And you would want to make sure your onboarding process is good. You want to make sure any sort of handoffs, interfaces between other people, that those run smoothly. Otherwise, you'll lose your mind, basically. If you have, let's say you're able to hire 10 people within a couple days. If each one of those people has 1 to 2 questions per day for you as they're getting started, you can see pretty quick you're going to have like 40 or 50 or 60 emails going back and forth, and you basically will have no time to do anything else but answer emails. And probably the questions they are asking, you're thinking, these are so basic. How are you asking this question? So make sure you get your stuff tight before you start hiring a bunch of people. And I'll tell you how to do it. So each person that you hire creates another communication channel in the organization, and that creates chaos, basically. All right. So here's the general org chart. Like I said, I came from a corporate job where the hierarchy was several layers deep. I like a flat organization, and I have two main roles that I hire for. That is the writing role and the content manager. They both report to me, the project manager. I've had as many as like 3 content managers or so, and about 12 or 14 writers, I can't remember, working for me at one time. People are probably thinking, right? Like, why are you doing the project management when you could hire a project management person to do it? Well, I kind of wanted to have some QA that I looked over. Otherwise, it's really easy to have a lot of work done. And if you don't watch, mistakes can be made. And if you don't have a way to, check things out, it doesn't have to be you, but if you don't have a way to check things out, you could end up with, 200 posts out there that all need to be edited because there's a problem. In fact, I had a coaching session with a client a couple weeks ago. He had about 100 articles written, and they had some issues where like violations to the Amazon operating agreement were made, and it's going to have to be fixed in multiple places in every single one of the 90 spots. If the person was reviewing each of the posts, or someone was reviewing each of the posts before they were published, he wouldn't have to go back and do this duplicate work. So that is why I wanted to have some QA in there, and I didn't want to add another person in. So I was like, hey, I'll just do it myself. This is a temporary project. All right. So what we're going to go through next is the phases. As I mentioned, I'll show you how to do this with basically just yourself starting and then slowly growing the team week by week. So number one, this is phase one. The time frame is about 1 week. You can see I'm serving as the PM currently. I don't know why I put my little head in there, but just to make it slightly more interesting. And I hired one writer. So like I said, from Upwork, talking about $15 for 1,000 words or so. And Andy mentioned that you get offers for $50 to $100 per 1,000 words. And sure, I mean, if you are, it sounds, Andy, you may be a specially qualified writer or something like that. That's totally fine. It turns out there's a full range of people that will work for different rates. So some people charge like $300 for 1,000 words. And other people charge like $3 for 1,000 words. All right. So there's a huge range. The range that I typically work in is the one I described, like 15, $17, whatever. Okay. So basically you hire one writer and you make sure the writer is, following the instructions, like writing in the proper voice, all the things you need the writer to do. The next week or two, so this is a time frame of 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to hire a couple more writers, and hopefully, right, you're going to have like one of your original writers that you hire, like that you promote rather, to the content manager / editor. At the end, or in a few slides, I'll tell you exactly what the content manager did for me, but you can basically have the content manager do whatever you want them to do. So it's totally up to you, but I'll share with you what I find valuable for the content manager to do. So in this case, you can see I've hired 2 other writers. Again, you want to run them through the same training. When you were hiring the first person, hopefully you got some feedback about the training materials, or if they had questions, you're able to fill in those gaps, and basically like get ahead of the curve for future writers so that you can answer the questions before they even have them. Further, when you have a writer that you like working with, a lot of times you'll hire them again and again, and then writers get bored writing, and usually actually like 90% of the people that I've asked, if I liked working with them, usually they enjoyed working with me. And I would say, hey, do you want to do something different? I want you to be an editor, and be hourly, and it should be a little bit more interesting. And usually people are like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. So after this phase 2, which you can spend 1 to 2 weeks on or so, you can hire a couple other writers. So often the writers take a little bit longer than the content manager. So you can have, I found like maybe 3 to 5 writers writing, and a content manager editing that work for those set of writers, for that set of writers rather. These are sort of like pods of work. Now, what I've found is a lot of times everyone wants to work like part-time, maybe between 5 and 20 hours a week. And then basically you need to figure out how much your writers want to write and then how much your content manager wants to work. And knowing that the content manager will probably take about 1 hour or so to do the editing and content management for one post. That said, you just have to figure out the right number of writers for the amount of work the content manager wants to do. It could be that your content manager, wants to work 40 hours a week. And in that case, maybe you need to hire like 8 writers, all right, something like that. So 8 writers, maybe they're writing one post per week, or sorry, one post per day. And then that would line up for the 40 hours that the content manager may work. All right. So you just have to figure it out. And typically what I like to do is build up a little bit of a queue, if you will. Usually it's a folder in Google Docs, but I'll build up, say, 5 or 6 or maybe 10 posts that need to be done, more than the content manager can handle, so that the content manager always has work to do. Sometimes I'll let the writers sit a little bit idle, but once the machine gets churning, it's pretty easy to like add one more writer on there, and then the content manager can slowly catch up. So this is like the general idea for this phase. Again, 1 to 2 weeks or so, but if it takes you 3 weeks because you don't have as much content to be written or your budget's a little bit different, then, take a little longer. It's totally fine. So phase 4, again, this is a 1 to 2 week period. And basically you're hiring as many writers as you need to fill your content needs and ensuring that you're not exceeding the capacity of your content manager. So again, you just have to do the math and figure it out. Basically, here's a quick example. If the content manager can work with you for 10 hours a week and each writer writes 2 articles per week, then you would need 5 writers. So you just got to do the math. Each of your writers may be writing a different amount, and it's totally up to you. If you want them to write more or less, that's fine. You can just tell them what you need. And basically the content manager is working through like whatever the writers are writing. And then what you can do, once you have one setup, you can do it again. All right. So at this point, you can hire however many writers you want, and then you can have the content managers editing like whatever folder they need to. And here's the thing. There's going to be turnover for all the positions for various reasons. It's great to work with freelancers because you could hire them in like a day, but the issue is sometimes they disappear. Sometimes someone's doing great work and then boom, they get a full-time job and they're like, hey, I can't do it anymore. I'm out. That's part of the luxury of working with freelancers or being a freelancer. So that's a risk. And that's why I kind of treat the role as like interchangeable parts. I want to have it generally unskilled, other than writing, right? I don't care if they have inside knowledge on the topic. I just want them to, communicate effectively. And quick note, I see some questions are being asked and I'll definitely get to them at the end. I just try my best to stay focused on the content as I'm going through it, but I see the questions and thank you for asking them. Okay. The other thing I guess you can keep in mind is, I kind of combine the pods or modules of people here, but you could think of them as like one content manager is working with 4 writers, another content manager is working with the other 4 writers. Maybe you mix it all up and it doesn't matter, but it's totally up to you. And for me, just to keep things organized, I had, one editor working with a group of writers and one editor working with another group of writers. Again, they didn't directly have a communication channel, but if you wanted to, get fancy, you could just tell your content manager, hey, assign it out to the writers. Here's the 50 articles that you're responsible for, and you assign it to the writers, you interface with the writers. Now that is another level of training. It's another, set of like communication that you would be out of. Again, I wanted to be in the middle of it as a QA exercise. All right. Next is how I saved over 24,000 minutes. So, like I mentioned before, it took me about an hour to an hour and a half or so to edit and draft up one single post. All right. It took me a while. A lot of times it would take me 2 hours. I'm bad at estimating time, so it probably took longer than that. I felt like I needed to do that work myself. I felt like I couldn't really teach someone what I had in my brain. I thought, I'm so advanced with SEO and on-page ninja stuff that I can't show someone what to do. And I wanted to control what was going to be published. It was stupid. I mean, I have some experience, but basically, I was the bottleneck. And at one point, I had 45 articles that were written, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to go publish those. But I was like, oh no, there's 45 of them. I'm not going to be able to do it. And I would just I wouldn't even start, and it would just continue to stack up. So at some point, I thought, I'm the bottleneck. I just need to get out of my way. What would this look like if I had a team? And what would it look like if I delegated this stuff that is taking me a long time and I don't particularly enjoy doing it? The content manager. So the content manager did a few things for me. Nothing crazy. And once I broke it down, no one task was like complicated. So here's what they did for me. They would edit the article. Now I would give the writers like a style guideline. So the formatting and like the font and the voice that I wanted them to use. So it was usually pretty good. I would have the editor edit for grammar and spelling, standard stuff. And then all the writers were working within Google Docs, and I just needed to have the content from Google Docs moved over to WordPress. I wanted to backlink to some external sites. I wanted to add some internal links. I want them to add affiliate links, a few images, and a video from YouTube. So once I wrote it down, I realized that it wasn't very complicated, and I don't know why I thought someone else couldn't do it. Yeah, sure, there's some keyword density ideas that you have to take into account, but I never gave any instructions to my writers for using keywords or using any sort of like best or reviews or density. I try not to hire anyone who says they're an SEO writer or anyone with like any sort of like SEO experience, because I just don't trust them. And there's other writers that they'll write without that reservation and the preconceived notions on content and SEO. So this is what the content manager did, and saved me many, many hours. Okay, so the couple highlights here. Basically, this is what your team can look like. I like to keep it simple. You can add another layer of management if you want to. You can have maybe a content manager, for example, who is sort of like a project manager for the writers, and maybe you have a separate editor. You could pull some of these apart if you want to. The more you do that, the less control you'll have over it, but you'll have a little more free time. So it's totally up to you. And, to this day, I still stay in the middle of it, again, for this QA part of the process. Okay. So quick note, I do have a course. It's called 5-Figure Niche Site. I'm not actively pitching it, but if people do wonder, I do have a course. And if you're on the email list, you should hear about it at some point. If you need the link, I can't actually send it to you. And in general, as I mentioned, the course is basically a repeatable process. I've used these systems and techniques and strategies myself, and I've taught a lot of other people as well. So let's get to the Q&A. So I'll check out the questions that were sent in the chat, and then I'll also come back to full screen here. I'll try and go back. But if you have other questions, feel free to ask. All right. So Tom earlier asked about like how many team members do I have and what are their roles? So I kind of talked about that. Currently, well, here's one thing. I don't have like a team all the time. I like to get lean. I don't want to have people waiting for me to give them assignments. I typically work on like a project basis where I'm thinking, hey, I want to publish X amount of articles over the next, few months. I figure out what I want to publish. I'll spawn up a team. I'll have them write and get a, content manager or two going. Currently, right now, I have a handful of writers going, about 5, and a content manager. And I don't know if I'm going to grow it much more in the short term. All right. Dennis mentioned most people, and this is about like the success and failure and getting started. So Dennis says most people need to fail before they succeed. Those that fail and quit life will most likely repeat, and those that fail and shake it off will go forward and have success. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, most people that stick with affiliate marketing usually, like, maybe it's survivorship bias kind of stuff going on, but basically there's very few people that like don't have a failure along the way. You're trying to make decisions with incomplete data and risk and competition. So it's probably not going to work out all the time. It's definitely not going to work out all the time if you're going beyond your comfort zone and stuff like that. And if you keep trying, usually you'll figure it out. All right. And Dennis says the KGR rocks, quick wins if it's done correctly. All right. Thomas says, is there a special niche where no one actually reads the content? Nope. It was a decent one here. And Michael says, what wording do you use in hiring an ad? Do I specify what you pay in the hiring ad? My templates are available, so you can check them out. As far as the wording, I think I've recently updated it, and I say something like ghostwriter for a blog, new contractors welcome. And one thing you can't do is say like Amazon reviews. I never use Amazon or reviews in the ad. I say ghostwriter for a blog, and maybe I'll give like, if it matters, I may give like the general category that they may be writing about, but I generally like Upwork will flag it if you put review in there a lot of times. Do I specify what I pay in the hiring ad? I can't remember. I think maybe I do, and just say, hey, here's the target for this gig. All right. And Thomas says you've paid $60 for 1,000 words and you've never been able to use the work. Is it something that's specialized, Thomas? And I've heard people say this similar things, by the way. It's insane the spectrum of like ideas about like what to pay. So some people will tell me, so this is funny. So Thomas, some people will tell me, I can't believe you pay $15. I pay $4.50, and it's absolutely like perfect content. English speaker, they think it's the greatest thing in the world. You're telling me you've paid $60 for 1,000 words and you haven't been able to use it. I've heard people paying $100 to $125 for 1,000 words, and it is also unusable. So I don't know. I think it's a it's probably a symptom of the people that work for different ranges and the job description that you have. So I'm typically looking for new freelancers and I'm willing to take a chance on them. Usually I can get a better deal for qualified people. I've heard, now I haven't paid as much as you're describing, Thomas, but I've heard that sometimes people that are on the higher end, they think a lot of themselves and they may not write as well. And they may not take feedback. If you ask them to change something or do something, they may not do it. Alan says, do you tell them what products to link to, or do you research and add it in, or do you tell them what products to link to, or do you just research what products to add in the post? It's totally up to you. Usually, if I'm hiring a writer for the first time or I have a specific opinion, I'll tell them what products to review. Otherwise, I'll just give them guidelines like find 4 products with 4-star reviews with a range of prices and leave it at that. If it's a new writer, or a new writer working with you, I suggest you tell them what products first until you guys have a rapport and they know what you're looking for. Edgar says, do I have the content manager do the actual posting of the edited articles? Yes, I have them draft it and then I actually hit publish. So they leave it in draft mode and I'll go take a look, make sure it looks fine. So basically I was going from, an hour and a half to 2 hours of editing and formatting and all that stuff to about 2 to 3 minutes. I would skim it, check the links, make sure the images look okay, hit publish. All right, Nick says, I've had no success on Upwork. How much detail on the article do you give? Not much. So I have like a style guideline, and then sometimes I'll send them a sort of the template, which is on, I think I can actually find the template for you. I'm going to send over in the chat. There's like a template on this page that I just sent over. So, I mean, there's sort of a template. You can give them as much, if you're having trouble, either the writer's bad or your instructions aren't thorough enough. There's 2 main things. So if you've hired like 5 writers and they all didn't give you what you wanted, then it's probably you. And you need to figure out what's wrong and improve your instructions. I think if you use the templates that are available on the page I just sent you, it'll get you a lot closer. So if it's just one case where it didn't work out, it may be the person. But if everyone is making like terrible mistakes, then they probably don't have enough information. That's on the assumption that people are trying to do what you're asking. So and Nick, a lot of times people will have trouble initially, so just keep at it and you'll figure it out. Jesse says, do I ask for pre-work before hiring? No, I don't. Kazi says, hi, Doug, 1 week published. How many contents? Can you rephrase it? I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're asking. Tom says, how do I choose a writer? Basically, this is actually a good question here. So in the job posting, which you can get on the page, right? If you follow that link, you get the job posting, right? There's no secret to that. Once you have that out there, you're going to get like a cover letter back. And usually I can look at a cover letter, read it. If it's like nonsense or it's like one that they've sent out to everyone, then I don't hire them. If they're, communicating well, if the cover letter kind of works, then I usually go for it. I look at their resume that they have on Upwork, and again, I make an assessment from there. If you just look at one, you really don't have much data. But as you look at, usually I'll let the ad run for about 2 days, something like that. Usually at that point, I'll have like, I don't know, 15 or 20 proposals, and then I'll just pick out the best ones, the very best ones. I throw out the others. Andy says, how do you determine the voice of writing? So I think what you're asking is, how do you determine what voice you want your content to be? So I'm going to assume that's your question. It's up to you. You write it however you want. I don't, it doesn't matter. You could pick what you want your blog to be like. So I recommend you write it in the first person, you write it like a blog. I don't recommend that you write it like a magazine review or academic or anything like that. I recommend it sounds like a person who wanted to have a blog and started, writing their opinions and writing in the first person. And I think if you write that, like, I want this to be a casual first person, piece of work, that's the way to go. That's what I recommend. All right, Jesse says you found many that write 1,000 words for 15 to 20 bucks. Cool, that's me too. Kazi says, do I have a country of choice for a writer? I try and get US or like Canada based, but I don't write that in there. I just say I want a native English speaker, and they need to know, American English. I know a lot of other countries have, English as native, right? It's a native language for the Philippines, Kenya, Jamaica, for India, right? I mean, like, it can be a native language for all those places. But if they don't speak American English, which is very clear in some interaction, it's super easy to see awkward phrasing. So I don't care where they're located. I don't care where they're from. If you can write in American English, then that's what I go for. All right. Edgar says, my site has a blog, many products, a cart, checkout straight to Amazon. You do most of your internal linking from posts and some direct link to Amazon. Do I think the cart is a good idea, or should I make every link an affiliate link in order for the visitor to get to Amazon right away? So look, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't do most of the stuff you're talking about there. I find it unnecessary, but I've never tried it, so I don't know. I don't do a cart. I don't have a checkout straight to Amazon. So I would encourage you to check with people that do that and that are doing well. I think it can be fine, but I have zero experience, so I won't speculate. I can tell you that if you have an affiliate link, that it can work well. Like, that's all I do. Content and affiliate links. Tom says, how do you train people? So I recommend, there's two main schools of thought here, or maybe three. So the first is like, don't train, you just ask people to do it. I think that's a bad idea. That's how you end up with like something that you didn't want. The other school of thought is to make videos. I think that's a bad idea. Most people will actually say, yeah, make a video, and then, you can just send them the video. What I found when I shot a video is, number one, it didn't go as smoothly as I thought. So I would try and show someone what to do, and I'm like, okay, you go click this button over here. And then I was like, oh, wait, the button's not over there. Actually, do it this way. And then other actions were sort of not clear, right? I would think, oh, I'm going to do it this way, but then I ended up doing it another way. So it was a little confusing. So I had to write everything out and sort of, script it out. And at that point, I thought, well, I may as well just write it out and use this. Now, the other part is things change all the time, right? A button will move within WordPress, a plugin gets updated, something changes, and then you have to reshoot the whole video. You got to reshoot the whole video. So I prefer a written document, a Google Doc, where if a button moves, no problem. You just take a new screenshot. So again, most people are going to tell you to make a video. However, I think a written job aid is by far superior. You can handle changes better. And for me, shooting video, and I've done hundreds of videos at this point, it's literally better to just write it out. So I use written documents. That's how I train. Tom says, how much do you spend on average on one site? I don't know that. I don't think about it that way. So I don't know what you mean exactly. See, the thing is, like, I'm always potentially reinvesting into a site. So I don't know on average how much I spend on the site. Sorry. If you want to rephrase it to something more specific, that may help. Sorry, Tom, you're asking like, you're trying to ask like super basic questions. But there's so many specifics when you're asking me exactly what I do. So my answers won't be helpful. So if I tell you on average on one site, I spend $100,000, that's not helpful for you, right? If I spend $100,000, but I make like $800,000, that's still not helpful, but you get the point with the ROI. So sorry, Tom, not trying to dodge your questions, but they're not as relevant because of like how I work with my sites. Okay, I'm going to try and go faster here. My voice is starting to get scratchy. All right. Dennis says, link to Amazon and let Amazon do what they do best. Cool. Yep, I agree. Jesse says, do you know, does short links to original link still count as backlink by Google? I don't know. I honestly don't understand what you're asking. Short links to original link count as backlink. I don't know what that means. I wouldn't worry about it. I know the words that you're using in the question, but I don't understand the thing you're trying to ask. All right. Okay. And Edgar says, I'm excited to see how the cart plays out. Okay. And Tom, feel free to rephrase the question if you want to, like maybe how much does it cost to launch a site, or how much do you spend in the first year of a site, or something like that. And even for those questions, I'm going to have to make some assumptions and recommendations for you. And Edgar, I was going to say for the cart thing, I would highly recommend that like you should have sort of like a method or someone in mind who's doing really well using that method, or basically you could be following, because I think this is like the WooCommerce stuff. Like, I don't know anyone that is using that's doing like super well. Now, I maybe don't get exposed to enough people or something like that, but it's an interesting way to vomit up a store with tons of products and maybe not do that well. All right. I see 90% of the time I see a cart situation, like I think what you're describing, it doesn't work out well. It doesn't mean yours won't work out well, but one must, take an approach of content, I think, versus getting a lot of products up. Okay. Quick note, and I see Dennis says, come to one of Doug's Friday Q&As. So I'm going to be out this Friday. I think I'm going to do it tomorrow instead. I think I'm going to do it tomorrow morning. So I'll schedule it. Yeah. All right. Kazi says, Web 2.0 or PBNs, which one do you prefer? So I prefer neither. So Kazi, That's like gray hat, and I stay away from that. I think maybe you joined late, but in the graph earlier in the timeline, I stay away from gray hat stuff. However, I could tell you 100% PBN is going to work way better than a Web 2.0. All right. And yep. So Edgar, do come back. Do let us know about the cart situation. Dennis says it could be a good question to ask Alex on WP Eagle. That's true. To my knowledge, I mean, Alex has some sites that are doing fine, but to my knowledge, they're like they do better when they have more content. Alex and I did a video where we actually talked about like WooCommerce and using that sort of situation. But yeah, I just don't like it. I don't like it because, again, what happens is someone will send me an email. They'll say, "Hey, I have 900 products on my site. It just pulled content down from Amazon, and it looks like I got a thin content penalty. Blah blah blah." And it rarely works out. So, yeah. Good luck, Edgar. That's all I could say. Good luck. Here's the deal. My focus is all on the content side, not putting up as many products as you can. And I'm not saying yours is or Alex or anyone else's, but generally that's what happens. People are like, well, I'll just put up more products. Okay, Tom says, what one advice would you give a newbie who doesn't have any prior experience hiring people online? So, one, I would say you only want. All right, I'm going to ignore your question. I'm not going to give you one piece of advice because in a silo with one piece of advice, it's not helpful. So I'm going to give you like 3 tips. How about that? All right, Tom. So it's going to take some time. Mistakes will be made. So go in with the expectation to learn, not to get it perfect the first time. It'll be a little frustrating. You'll try and figure out like what's going on. I would say try to hire one person to write one article within the next week, right? If you put up a job posting, you should be able to hire one person within a couple or a few days max. And then you can start refining the process. Part of that will be like creating a job aid. And then you'll tell the writer, hey, let me know if there's something that's not clear. If there's anything you don't understand in this documentation, let me know, ask a question, and then improve the documentation based on their feedback. If it's not clear to them, you should do your best to make it as clear as possible. And, it's totally possible that you hire someone who's just bad, right? Maybe they do a bad job and they don't understand how to read directions and they ignore you. All right. That's possible. But after you hire a couple people and you're getting more feedback and you know that everyone can't be incompetent, some people will be trying to do their best, you will slowly improve your job aid and you'll slowly improve your skills in hiring people. And that's literally what I did. I had worked with a lot of people in real life, but I didn't hire anyone online. And I was trying to hire, people overseas for as cheap as possible. And then I realized I needed to hit some, prerequisite level of, payment before they would, have the quality that I was looking for. So anyway, I didn't give you one piece of advice. So remember, it's going to be a little like difficult at first. You're not going to get exactly what you're looking for. Get feedback from the people that you hire and then hire people as quickly as you can so you can start learning and developing the skills as soon as possible. Okay. Kazi says, all right, this is the last question here because my voice is dying here. All right, Kazi, which step taken when your website suffers negative SEO? So analyze your backlinks, disavow the bad ones. That's basically it. And then you go to the Google Search Console. That's where you disavow. And then you submit a reconsideration request. Google reviews it, and then they will either accept or deny it. Okay. Tom says, how much do you spend for 50 articles on a writer, an editor, and also outreach? Okay. Tom, I feel like maybe those are unrelated questions. So, all right. This simple math on this one. All right. 50 articles, $15 a piece. So multiply that out. I think it's, what is that? 750. Is that right? I could be off. I'm doing it in my head. 50 articles is 50 hours at $10 a piece. That is that amount. $500 sounds like. Outreach, something totally different. That is completely unrelated. So I don't know what you're talking about, Tom. What do you mean by outreach? Oh, Dennis has a great idea. You could try providing someone in your family your job posting and see if they understand what you want. And the other thing you can do is, well, use my job posting, by the way. I mean, it's on the link that I sent in the chat. And the other part is if you go to the YouTube channel and there's one of the videos that has a decent number of comments, you can probably ask someone a question in the comments and they'll check it out for you. Okay. So Tom, I think you're at a cool time. It sounds like you're a beginner based on the questions that you're asking. So how much does it charge to do email outreach for a guest post? So when I've hired people, I typically paid between $10 and $20 per hour, depending on what other work they were doing for me. However, that is beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. So it's unrelated to the stuff that we're talking about, which is okay, but I don't want you to think that they're directly related or anything. And Dennis says, you've used my template, you've had good results. Yeah, basically for email outreach, the tips that I'll give you are don't hire anyone who says that they know how to do email outreach. So that is counterintuitive, but again, I kind of don't trust anyone who says that they're doing that stuff. A lot of times they're like spamming the internet. So I would avoid anyone who says they do that. And then the other part is you just need someone who can communicate well and send emails. So with that in mind, hiring like an executive assistant or an assistant of some kind is probably the best route. Most of the time, I found a writer that I was working with and said, hey, I don't need any more stuff written. Do you want to do some other work that's kind of interesting? And then I would plug them into my process. Michael says, thanks for the insights. You're welcome. Dennis, thanks for all the insightful comments as well. Tom, thanks for joining up today. I'm heading out. I got to roll. I got to walk Georgie. She's been very patient. Georgie, you want to come say hello? Hey, girl. Come on. You want to come up here? Here, come up here. You want to come up here and say hello? Poke your head up. Come on. Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time. And like I said, I think tomorrow I'm going to do the live Q&A instead of Friday. So thanks. We'll talk to you next time.